The sky above Earth was calm and blue, but far away in the darkness of space, something was moving fast, something big, something no one had seen before. It looked like a shining black triangle, glowing with soft purple light around its edges, moving slowly toward Earth without any sign of weapons or attack. But it was huge, bigger than anything made by humans, and inside, it was something powerful and ancient. People across the world stopped and looked up as the news spread fast. Every TV, every phone, every screen showed the same thing, a message in golden letters floating in the air, with a voice that felt like music and thunder together. I am Queen Varela of the Star Empire. I come not for war, not for land, not for power. I come to offer myself to one human. The world was confused. People asked why. What does she want? What does it mean to offer herself? Leaders held meetings. Scientists tried to understand. Priests called it a sign from the stars, and some people even fell to their knees, thinking she was a goddess. But the message was clear. She wanted to meet one human, and she would choose him herself. No tests, no questions, no politics. That human was a man named Zane, a quiet man living in a small dusty town, far from the city he was. Not rich, not powerful, not famous. He lived alone, in a small house with a broken fence and a silent garden. He had no family and no past that anyone knew much about. When the soldiers came to pick him up, he was not surprised. He simply nodded, picked up his old bag, and said nothing. He wore a simple coat and walked with slow steps, his face calm, like he had already seen this day in his dreams. They took him to the edge of the city, where a giant ship stood like a mountain with smooth black walls, and a soft hum in the air, waiting for him to step inside. But something strange happened before he reached it. As Zane walked through a narrow alley behind the tall buildings, he heard a sound, soft and broken, like a child crying. He turned his head and saw her. She was sitting on the cold ground, hidden in shadows, weak and dirty. Her clothes torn, her skin pale silver with soft glowing lines, her hair like faded stars. She looked like a lost ghost, a creature forgotten by time. People passed by, but no one looked at her, no one stopped. She was just trash in the corner of the world, alone and dying. Zane stopped and looked at her, his eyes steady, his face still. He walked to her slowly and knelt down. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes wide, but full of fear. He gave her the bread from his bag and took off his coat to cover her shaking body. She looked at him with surprise, like she had never felt kindness before. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sorry," she whispered with a voice full of pain and cold. At that moment, the sky opened with light, and a soft golden path came down from the queen's ship. Her voice echoed again. "Zane, step forward. Your queen awaits you. I offer myself to you." But Zane did not move. He looked at Sari, then at the ship, then back at Sari, and he smiled a small, soft smile. He took her hand and helped her stand. Her legs weak, but she held onto him like he was the only solid thing in a falling world. The soldiers called him again. The light became brighter. The queen's voice sounded confused and sharp. "Why do you wait, Zane? Come and take what all men dream of." But Zane did not speak. He simply turned away from the ship and walked with Sari in his arms toward the shadows, not the light. His steps slow but sure. The people watching gasped. Some shouted, some laughed, some cried. The cameras turned. The world saw it live. A man walking away from a queen, choosing a broken alien woman instead of power, beauty, and magic. In the dark screen of space, the queen stood still, her eyes glowing, her lips tight, her pride shaken. And in a small, dirty alley of Earth, a new story began, not of glory, not of kings and queens, but of a man who made a quiet choice. The narrator spoke in a soft, deep voice, like a whisper to the soul. While the world waited for the queen, Zane made a different choice, and the future changed forever. Asterisk. The night was quiet around the broken street, where Sari now lay wrapped in Zane's old coat, while he made a fire from dry sticks and metal scraps. She watched him with eyes full of questions and pain. She was not used to warmth, not used to kindness, not used to being seen as more than dust in the wind. She had once stood in golden halls far away from Earth, with stars above her and guards around her. Daughter of a noble bloodline, born into light and power, her name once echoed through cities, floating in the sky. where people flew not walked and sang not spoke, but all of that was long before all of that was. Before she was thrown into silence, Sari closed her eyes and felt the memories return not in images, but in sharp pieces like glass in the mind voices. Shouting hands pulling her crown being ripped away as her mother screamed, and her father vanished in fire, a betrayal that came not from strangers but from her own blood. Her own sister Varela had not always been queen. She was the second daughter, proud, clever, ruthless, where Sari was quiet, soft, always full of wonder. Varela had always wanted more power, more control, more everything. She believed softness was weakness and mercy was a flaw, and she made others believe it too. The day Sari was cast out, the sky over her world turned black. Her body was thrown from the palace. Ship sent down into a dark, forbidden moon, the place of exiles where nothing grows and no ships land. She fell like a broken star, her body screaming against the cold, her mind holding only one question. Years passed on that cursed moon where the ground cut her feet and the air was thin and bitter. She learned to survive by hiding, by running, by staying silent at night. She looked at the stars and wondered if anyone remembered her name, if anyone still whispered Sari in the dark. But the stars gave no answer, only silence. One day, a small cargo ship crashed near her cave, a human ship, broken and burning. She pulled the pilot from the fire, a man from Earth, lost and afraid. She gave him water made from frozen air and light from glowing stones. He taught her a few words in English and told her stories of blue oceans and green trees and cities that touched the sky with hands of steel. He said Earth was not perfect, but it had something her world had lost. It had people who still cared, even when they were weak, even when they were afraid. He said Earth had second chances. She remembered those words like a secret song she had never heard before. When he left in the rescue pod, he offered to take her, but she said no, her body too weak, her heart not ready. She stayed behind as the stars moved again above her. Later, when she finally found an old smuggler ship and fixed it with her hands, she had only one place in mind, not the palace, not revenge, not war. She wanted to see the world the pilot spoke of. She wanted to walk on a street where no one knew her name, and maybe, just maybe, she would be more than the ghost of a lost throne. Earth was cold to strangers. The people feared her shape, her skin, her glowing eyes. They pushed her away, cursed her, called her names she did not understand, and she became a shadow again, living in alleys and feeding on leftover bread, pretending the cold did not hurt, pretending the tears were just rain. And then came the day the sky opened, and her sister appeared, not with warships, not with fire, but with a soft voice, offering herself to one human, like a game, like a test, like she owned all choices. Did not laugh, she only watched from the shadows, wondering what this new plan was, what mask her sister now wore, and what price she would demand for this gift of herself. She did not expect anything, she did not hope for anything, but then he came, Zane, with quiet eyes and hands that held no weapons, only warmth. He looked at her, not like a thing, not like a danger, but like a question, like a person, and in that moment, something inside her cracked open now. She sat by his fire, feeling heat, not from the flames, but from something older, something she had almost forgotten, trust. She looked at him and spoke for the first time in her own tongue, not expecting him to understand. I am not what I was. I am not what they made me. I am only Sari. Zane looked at her, and though he did not know her words, he nodded slowly as if he heard her heart, not her voice, and she felt for the first time since her fall that maybe she was not alone anymore. Somewhere above, the queen watched through distant eyes, her face cold, her pride bleeding, and deep inside the earth, where no eyes could see, something ancient began to stir, a force that knew Sari's name, a force that had waited long for her return. High above the clouds, where air turns thin and space begins, the royal ship floated in silence, its black surface shining like liquid night. And inside that ship stood Queen Varela, her eyes burning with golden light and her hands clenched tight. Behind her back, she had ruled over star systems, broken rebellions, bent planets to her will with only a word. But now one man, one simple human, had done what no general ever dared. He had rejected her, not with war, not with insult, but with silence. And a turn of his back, her voice echoed through the crystal hall. Bring me the seers, bring me the watchers, bring me the voices that whisper through the winds of fate. They came with heads bowed, robes trailing behind, glowing scrolls in their hands, and fear in their eyes, for they knew what rejection did to the queen. They had seen planets punished for less. They had watched her burn cities for a single lie. They had heard her laugh as stars fell in her name. She asked them one question, a name. Why did the human choose her? Why did he walk away from me? Who is this broken thing he protects? The seers trembled, their words soft like falling ash. Her name is Sari. She was once of your house. She is of your blood, your line, your past. The queen's lips moved slowly like ice cracking across stone. That name is dead. That line is finished. That shadow is forgotten. But one old watcher, older than the others, older than memory, stepped forward, his eyes white with age, his voice dry like sand. She was not forgotten, your majesty. She was erased, and fate remembers what pride tries to bury. The queen moved fast, her hands slicing through the air, and the old watcher vanished into light. Not a scream, not a word, only dust where once stood a man who dared to speak of shame. She turned to the stars, her voice now calm but colder than death. Prepare the storm, open the gates, summon the mirror. I will see him myself. I will see the man who shamed a queen. In the center of the ship, a great mirror opened wide. Not made of glass, but of memory and time. It shimmered with living light, showing a small fire, a ruined alley, and two figures close together, a man and a forgotten woman. She watched Zane speak without words, watched Sari rest without fear, and something inside her cracked, a soundless scream, not of pain but of confusion, not anger, but something deeper. For once long ago, before crowns and wars, before her voice commanded fleets, they were sisters, not by power, but by laughter, by secret songs sung under moonlight in gardens now gone. Sari had once braided her hair, told her stories of quiet worlds where people lived, not ruled, where love was not earned through fear, and those stories had made her feel small, and that smallness turned into rage, a rage she had carried for years, wearing it like armor, pretending it was strength. She watched the man Zane and wondered what he saw in Sari. What made him turn away from golden thrones and walk into broken alleys? What made him see worth in something discarded and forgotten? Her hand touched the mirror, and it pulsed with heat. Open a channel to Earth. I will speak to them. I will speak to him. Across Earth, every screen flickered and changed, every city froze in silence as the queen's face appeared, eyes glowing, voice steady. People of Earth, you were offered the hand of peace. You were offered a gift above all gifts, and you turned away from it. You turned away from me. For this insult, I do not bring war, I bring judgment. Your skies will weep, your stars will tremble, and your cities will remember the price of pride. Zane watched from the alley, firelight dancing on his face. Sari beside him, weak but calm, her hand in his like a thread of light in deep water. He did not look afraid, only tired, only quiet. Stepped forward to the small camera of a streak drone and spoke, not to the queen, not to the world, but to whoever still listened. You offered yourself not to serve, but to be worshipped. You called it a gift, but it was a test. I did not turn from you. I turned to someone who needed me, not someone who wanted to own me. The queen heard his words, and for the first time in many years she felt something sharp, not anger, not hate, but a wound deeper than any blade made by metal, a crack in the perfect mirror she had built around herself. She turned from the screen and walked back into the dark of her ship. Her guards followed her, but none spoke, none dared to ask what now. But inside her a new question had begun to grow, a question louder than rage, stronger than pride, a question she could not yet answer. And far away under the gray sky of Earth, Sari opened her eyes wide, as if something inside her had awoken, something old, something hidden, something that remembered who she was and why she had to return. The morning came slow and cold, with smoke in the air and silence across the alley where Zane still sat beside the weak frame of Sari, her body wrapped in the same coat, her breath slow but steady, her eyes closed but moving beneath, like someone caught between worlds, between what was and what might be. Zane had not slept, not really, his eyes red from the light of fire and worry, his thoughts heavy with the voice of a queen who spoke like thunder, and the quiet of a girl who held his hand like it was the only thing real left in a world full of lies. He looked at her not with fear, not with duty, but with something deeper, something he did not yet name, a feeling that grew not from beauty, not from power, but from pain shared, and truth lived. The city was not safe anymore. Watchers flew above in metal wings, scanning every face. Drones floated in every street, recording every step, every whisper. Soldiers moved like shadows, waiting for the queen's next order, and people hid in their homes, praying to gods who never answered. Zane stood up, pulled Sari gently to her feet, and began to walk, not fast, not afraid, but sure. With each step they moved away from the edge of the world and closer to something older than war, older than royalty, a place he only knew from dreams he never understood. He remembered a cave hidden deep in the hills where stars could not see and where silence was thick like stone. A place he found years ago while searching for peace from memories that never let go, and now that same place called him again, but not for rest, this time for truth. They reached the hills by nightfall, stars above, like open eyes watching without blinking, and the cave waited as if it remembered him, as if it had always known he would return, not alone, but with someone who carried stars inside her bones. Inside the cave walls pulsed with soft blue light. No wires, no fuel, no machines, just life, old and sleeping, but not dead. Sari touched the stone, and the light grew brighter, her fingers glowing lines spreading across the wall like veins of light awakening. Zane watched but said nothing. He felt no fear, only awe, as the cave spoke, not in words, but in feeling, in warmth, in memory that was not his, but still familiar. Sari walked deeper into the cave, her steps slow, her hands shaking, as if something inside her was rising, something buried long ago behind walls of pain and exile. She reached the center where a pool of clear water reflected not her face, but a crown floating above nothing, a crown made of light and sorrow. She knelt before it, not to take it, but to face it, and Zane saw tears in her eyes, not of weakness, but of memory. She spoke in her language, old and soft words falling like snow, and the crown vanished, leaving only still water and the sound of her breathing. Zane stepped forward, knelt beside her, and held her hand again, this time not to comfort, but to share something silent and strong, like a bridge between souls, made not of stone, but of wounds healed together. Sari turned to him, her voice quiet, but sure. I was meant to lead, not rule. I was meant to protect, not conquer, but I was cast away for believing kindness was not weakness. And now the one who threw me down wears the crown built on silence and fear. Zane looked at her, his words simple, but full of truth. Then let us show them that power is not in thrones, not in ships, not in fear, but in what we choose to save, not what we choose to destroy. The cave pulsed once more, and something deep below stirred like a sleeping heart remembering its own name, like an ancient machine waiting for the right voice, the right presence, the right bond. A light rose from the ground, not fire, not electricity, but something pure. It wrapped around Sari and Zane, connecting them, not just hand to hand, but soul to soul. And in that moment, something changed, not outside, not in the world, but inside them. Both. Zane saw flashes not from her past, but from her essence, stars being born, a voice calling her name, not as Sari, but as Sarah, the guardian of light, a title lost, a truth hidden. And Sari saw Zane not as a human, not as a protector, but as the balance, a soul born without crown, without name, yet able to hold both war and peace in one breath. When the light faded, they were still themselves, but something new had begun, not a power, not a weapon, but a bond unbreakable by time, by fear, by blood. Outside the cave the wind shifted, the sky darkened, and in the royal ship high above, the queen opened her eyes and whispered the words she feared most. She remembers. Far away from Earth, across the cold silence of space, the royal ship drifted like a god asleep in the dark. Its wings folded, its lights dim, but inside its walls, something ancient had awakened. A memory long buried, a truth Varela had tried to burn, erase in silence, but truth does not die, it only waits. The queen stood alone in the chamber of echoes, a room Made of black stone and golden light were voices of old rulers, whispered through the walls, not in sound but in weight the voices had. Once called her worthy, once lifted her to the throne after the fall of Sari, but now they were silent, watching, judging. Remembering, she stared into the mirror again, the same one that once showed her the face of her people, the same mirror that now refused to obey its surface, frozen, its light dead, and in its stillness she saw only her own face, twisted not with anger but with fear, not of Sari but of the truth that Sari still lived, and worse still was rising back on earth in the cave of stars. Zane and Sari stood near the glowing pool where the crown had once floated, but now the water showed a new image, a city not of earth, not of now, a city made of white towers and crystal bridges floating in sky, filled with birds of light and ships that sang instead of flying. Sari stared at the vision, her heart racing, her breath quick, her hands shaking. She knew this place not as a dream, but as memory, not from stories but from blood. She had once walked those bridges, once danced in those halls, once laughed under those suns. This was her home. This was her kingdom before it was stolen. Zane stepped beside her, his eyes wide, not with wonder, but with realization. He understood now, not all of it, but enough to see that Sari was not just a refugee, not just a lost soul. She was something greater, something royal, something meant to protect, not to rule, a guardian, not a queen. Water shifted again, now showing a young Sari sitting with Varela, sharing fruit under the moon, laughing without care, reading scrolls about old prophecies, one of which spoke of a bond that would rise in the time of shadow, a bond between two spirits, one of light and one of earth, chosen not by blood, but by heart. Sari whispered the words, I thought it was just story. I never knew it was about me. Zane looked at her with steady calm. Then maybe the stories were waiting for you to become real. The cave began to tremble, not with fear, but with energy. Something below the stone had heard her voice and accepted her truth. Lines of light spread across the ground, drawing symbols older than any language, symbols that meant return, rebirth, remembrance. Sari knelt down, placed her hand on the center symbol, and closed her eyes, and in that moment, the truth poured into her. Like wind into fire, not just images but feelings, the betrayal, the exile, the promise her parents tried to protect her. Her sister lied to the council, used fear to take the crown, made Sari look like a threat, not a child, and when they cast her down, her mother cried for days until silence took her to. Zane saw her shoulders shake, saw her mouth tremble, but no tears fell because her pain was too deep for tears. It was the kind that carves mountains, not rivers, and yet he did not try to speak, only stayed close, holding the space around her like a shield of stillness. From the pool rose a single orb of blue light, spinning, gently hovering before her as if offering itself, and when she touched it, it entered her chest like a breath held for 1,000 years. Her eyes flashed, her hair lifted, her scars glowed, and then it was done. Not power, not transformation, but memory fully returned. I am Sarah, daughter of Elion, guardian of the second sun, born to protect, not to rule, cast down by shadow, but risen through truth. Zane felt the words move through him like wind through leaves, and he spoke only one thing, then let us finish. What they tried to bury above the hills, the sky split open, not with thunder, not with fire, but with light shaped like wings, and from that light came a voice, not the queen, not the council, but the deep voice of the stars themselves. She has awakened, the balance has returned, the mirror must break, the crown must choose again, and in the royal ship Varela fell to her knees for the first time in her life, as the old throne behind her began to crack, and from that crack came not ruin but light, a sign that even stars cannot hold lies forever. Asterisk. The wind over the hills grew louder, as if the sky itself was breathing heavier. The clouds shifted and twisted into shapes not born of nature, but of memory and magic, and high above the ground the royal ship opened its wings again, its engines humming like 1,000 voices singing in fear and power inside the ship. The queen stood again, no longer calm, no longer graceful, her crown cracked, her armor dim, her face tight with something she would never name, a mixture of sorrow, rage, pride, and of fear. She could not bury any longer. She spoke to her guards, her voice Sharp like a blade, prepare for descent. The city of earth will witness truth. The man will be brought to me alive, and the traitor brought to her knees. The guards moved quickly, their steps loud across the metal halls, warriors bred from starlight. Trained without mercy, now ready to follow her into the one thing there. Queen never allowed weakness shown through doubt, but deep inside the earth, below the hills, and beneath the stone, the ancient cave lit brighter than before, its walls pulsing with rhythm like a heartbeat that had returned after ages of silence. Sorry now. Sarah stood near the circle of light, her arms lifted, her eyes glowing, her presence changing with each breath. Zane stood beside her, his hands steady, his face calm, not because he knew what would come, but because he knew what mattered, that standing here beside her was more than any weapon, any throne, any promise of safety. From the circle a voice rose, not a scream, not a whisper, but the truth spoken as force. The guardian has returned, the balance is chosen, the trial must begin. The stone above them opened, revealing the sky, where the queen now descended in a storm of light, her ship breaking through clouds like a god falling from heaven, warriors flying behind her, ships lining the air, and across the world screens blinked as people watched from cities, deserts, ocean stations, the moment history would change. Sorry walked into the open field, her feet light, her eyes forward, her body no longer weak, her fear no longer silent behind her. Zane followed, not as a hero, not as a protector, but as the choice that refused to be controlled. The queen landed, her feet touching ground with force, her army behind her, her voice rising across the wind. Sarah, you stand here not as ruler, not as heir, but a shadow wearing the skin of light. Surrender, and I will let the human live resist and watch his world burn. Sorry did not step back. She raised her hand, not in attack, but in memory, and the sky answered her call. The wind spun around her, not wild, but in patterns like threads, pulling stars into motion around her shoulders, forming wings made not of feathers but of truth. Zane stood between the two forces, his voice low but heard across the world. This is not your throne to defend or destroy. This is not your war to win. This is a truth you tried to hide, and now it rises. The queen moved first, a flash of gold, a blast of energy, roaring across the air faster than any bullet, but it hit nothing. As Sari lifted her hand, and the light split around her like water parting before truth, her body untouched, her heart steady, she walked forward, each step shaking the ground, not with power but with certainty, and from her voice came words of old, not in anger but in judgment. Your rule was built on lies, your crown stolen, your fear dressed as strength, and I am not here to take back what was lost. I am here to remind you what you feared. The queen screamed, not like royalty, but like a child watching. The world slipped from her fingers, and her army hesitated, not in loyalty, but in doubt. The first crack in their silence, and then one by one they began to lower their weapons, not because they believed. Sorry, not yet, but because they saw her stand alone against fire and not flinch in the chaos. Zane closed his eyes and felt something stir within him. Not power, not light, but a thread pulling from Sari's strength into his chest, and in that connection the ancient truth of balance revealed itself. One voice born of star, one voice born of soil, joined not by command, but by choice, stepped forward, his hand in hers, and the sky above answered, a ring of light spreading from their feet across the field, pushing back soldiers, pushing back ships, not as force, but as awakening. The queen fell to her knees, not from injury, but from the weight of truth. The mirror of power finally held to her face, the reflection, not of greatness but of fear dressed in jewels, and the earth watched as the sky cleared. The fire faded, and the silence that followed was not empty but full of beginning. The field was silent, the air soft and slow, the sun rising behind the hills like a witness called to speak after years of silence. And across the field, two sisters stood, one on her feet, one on her knees, and between them stood a man whose presence had broken more than tradition. It had broken the lie that ruled the stars. Sari breathed deep, her chest rising with light, her voice quiet but steady like wind through old trees. She looked at her sister, not with hate, not with pride, but with truth. And truth carried weight more than swords, more than fire, more than crowns carved from gold. You were never the enemy, she said, you were the fear. I tried to love the shadow, I tried to light, but when I offered my hand you turned away, and when I fell, you rose not to lead, but to hide from your own reflection. The queen lifted her eyes, their glow dim, their edge dull. She said nothing, for words could no longer rewrite what all had seen, the people who watched across earth, the council who sat frozen in their high towers, the soldiers who lowered their heads, the stars who now turned with quiet respect toward a name once lost. Zane stepped forward, his hand still holding Sari's, his voice soft but clear, not like a hero, but like a man who had walked beside pain and not turned away. You asked the world to choose power, but power without heart is only fear dressed in gold. You offered yourself as gift, but gifts are not taken, they are given freely. He turned to the people who watched from their screens, from their windows, from the corners of the universe, and he spoke not like a leader, not like a soldier, but like a mirror held to every soul. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is see what others ignore. Sometimes the right choice is not the loudest, not the easiest, but the one that brings light to the forgotten. From the sky came no thunder, no fire, only quiet, and in that quiet, the queen stood slowly, her face calm, her hands open, her crown now in her hands, not on her head. She walked to Sari, each step slower than the last, and when she reached her she did not kneel, she did not fight, she simply held out the crown. Sari looked at it, the symbol of everything lost and broken, and she did not take it. Instead she closed her eyes and raised her hand. The crown lifted into the air, floating above them both, and then slowly it cracked, not in anger, not in ruin, but like a seed breaking open, and spring light poured from it, not blinding, not burning, but warm and alive. And from that light came a new form, a small crystal sphere, soft and glowing. It hovered between them, and Sari touched it with one finger, and the voice of the stars returned. This is no longer a throne, this is no longer a prize, this is a burden meant for two, and balanced by choice. Zane looked at her, and she looked at him, and in that moment, the choice was not spoken. It was shared. He nodded once, not because he wanted power, not because he sought honor, but because he understood that standing beside her was not duty, it was truth and love and courage wrapped together. The sphere sank into the earth, and from its light grew something new, not a palace, not a fortress, but a tree tall and silver, with leaves like glass and roots that reach deep into the planet, the first seed of a world not ruled, but cared for. The queen stepped back, her eyes now full of something forgotten wonder. She looked at Sari and spoke for the first time, without command, without weight. I thought you were weak because you showed mercy. I thought you were soft because you chose to listen. But now I see you were always stronger than I ever was. Sari walked to her and placed a hand on her shoulder, not in forgiveness, not in farewell, but in understanding. We were never enemies, we were always mirrors, broken by fear, now whole by truth. The sky above shifted, the watchers across earth stood in silence, and the stars themselves blinked once, like eyes that had watched long enough, and now could finally rest. Zane and Sari stood beneath the silver tree, their hands still together, their hearts steady, not as rulers, not as saviors, but as voices in the dark, who chose to listen when others shouted, and to lift when others turned away. The world did not end, the wars did not vanish, the pain did not disappear, but something had changed, a thread had been rewoven, a bond remembered, a truth returned. Far beyond the hills where light met sky, a single bloom appeared on the silver tree, its petals bright, its roots deep. A sign that even after ruin, life could begin again, not through power, not through fear, but through choice, the real choice.